Welcome to By the Numbers. This is a new program that we are utilizing to help understand and share information when it comes to the finances of whether it's the two communities that we serve, the understanding of a town department, how it functions financially, to even how education is funded and how a state puts together its fiscal year budget and then gives local aid to its communities. The mission of the show itself is to speak with local stakeholders and hear their perspective and their concerns on the community's financial picture, or even find out how things are going with their particular department. Today's guest is the superintendent of schools for the Whitman Hanson Regional School District. I welcome Mr. Jeff Szymaniak.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Welcome. For those who don't know who you are, we know that you were the former principal. Now you are the school superintendent. Have you spent your entire career in education?
Pretty much. I spent, after graduate school, I actually spent 2 years in higher education. I was an area coordinator at the University of Hartford, so I was like a big dorm director for 3 different buildings. And then I came to the South Shore and started substitute teaching in the town of Abington. And I was actually a tutor for the Whitman Hanson Regional School District in 1994. And since then I taught. I was an assistant principal, a coach. I kind of did everything you could do up to now being the superintendent of schools. So yeah, you could say my entire career has been in some sort of education.
So talking about being the principal of Whitman Hanson Regional High School, what was it like trying to put together a budget for a school as compared to a department per se?
So the interesting thing, since I've been here, and I started here in 2010, the challenge of our district budget trickled down to the schools, where we were just given numbers. We've been almost a level service budget since 2010, with the growth of salaries, with the growth of insurances and whatever. So the former superintendent would just hand me the same numbers that I had the previous year for supplies, for staffing, for the incidentals that we needed in school. But I'll back up. In 2010, when I came here, and if you're looking at the high school budget specifically, the town of Whitman and Hanson spent $81,000 in instructional supplies for the high school alone. The budget today for instructional materials is under $14,000. So we retracted over time and cut things like textbooks, cut things like reading materials for our students, and that's where we've gone. So building a school budget was relatively simple because you got what you got, and you were happy to get what you got. Building the district budget has been a challenge. It's been an eye-opener to look at all the intricacies of numbers and making sure that it's equitable in both towns and services are equitable in both towns. The term equity, and you're going to hear this from me and from my assistant superintendent at school committee meetings more and more, is that the state of Massachusetts has made a definite effort to make sure that everything that students receive is equitable amongst their peers in the Commonwealth. And when I say that, we look at things in our 2 towns, and we want to make sure our 4th grade experience in Hanson at Indian Head is the same 4th grade experience at Duval or at Conley. And we found some different things, not educationally necessarily, but for some social activities and such. So you're going to hear making sure we're equitable quite a bit. I happen to be in a new superintendent's induction program, and the superintendents that are training us, so to speak, are talking about achievement gaps, equity amongst students, equity amongst our special ed population, amongst our regular ed population, our ELL population, and such. So that's a term that I'm going to use more frequently than not in meetings at school committee with parents and so.
So this was your first budget cycle as superintendent. What was it like to present it to the committee?
So interestingly enough, back in December, we were invited to the Whitman FinCom meeting, something that the school hasn't presented numbers formally prior to the February open meeting on the budget hearing. So I had a budget. We kind of have a budget in September, October. We have rough numbers of where things are at. So we went through our rough numbers in December, and then presenting it to the committee, I think we spoke about it at our January meeting and at the open meeting in February. The numbers necessarily didn't change as they go. And I wasn't super intimidated by that. And what we tried to do, and I say we a lot, my team in central office, was try to keep the budget as simple as possible for the person who's sitting at home and isn't a numbers cruncher, who is someone who just wants to read and somewhat like me is, get me to the bottom line. What do you need and how much is it going to cost? I'm a taxpayer in the town of Pembroke, and that's how I look at our budget in Pembroke. Tell me how much it's going to affect me in my home life, what I want for my children in the schools, and what I want as far as keeping the town in a spot that we can attract new people to our community. So when we developed our budget, which is much different than the budget book of the past, I think our budget book was 80 or 90 pages long. We condensed it to 20 with some supplemental items. But the budget book that we presented is basically a model from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. They recommend a simple budget for the taxpayer to see or the school committee to read, spelling out the needs of what you need and the whys of how you got there. That's the budget we presented. I think the committee appreciated the descriptions. They appreciated the brevity of the budget so that we weren't so detailed in so many little areas that they couldn't understand why. And the big areas, that we went up in some staffing, in some salaries, not out of the ordinary. I looked at area contracts from different districts. We're right on par with all our localities as far as teachers associations and their raises. Our big issue has been special education and students that require services outside of our district. So presenting that to the school committee and making sure that they were clear in where our high needs were, that's why we had a real bump. So it was new, it was interesting for me to be the person presenting that, and I never thought I was a numbers guy, but I'm a numbers guy now, and my parents are even saying, I can't believe you've memorized all that stuff. So they're pretty proud of the fact that I've become a numbers guy.
So what's the approach to assembling the budget, and what were some of the significant challenges that you had? Does it differ? And I ask you this because I think that there are different ways to do it. You could do zero-based budgeting. You could do it from taking what you had the previous years or looking over a 5-year span and deciding what was the approach.
So we do a little bit of everything. I think you have set costs. We have contractual costs with our faculty, with our teachers. We have contractual costs with our bus company. We have contractual costs with our maintenance or our cleaning company. We have contractual costs with our software, our Infinite Campus. Those are contractual costs that are always there. So we build on what we've had in the past. Taking a zero-based approach isn't something that I'm familiar with and I'm necessarily comfortable with. So we build on what we've had last year and look at those increases and then build it around there. The one cost that is very, very difficult to predict is special education. And for folks at home, what special education is, it's not the special education teacher in our schools. Some of our students require services that we can't handle or that we can't provide in our district. So they are called out-of-district students. They will go to a collaborative school. They might go to a private special school. They might even go to a residential school, which means they live there. And those are costs that we can't anticipate because, Kevin, if you moved into town tomorrow with a student that might be a residential student, I wouldn't have known that 6 months ago. And we've had students move in and out of district that require services beyond our capacity. And when we built this budget, our special education out of district and transportation costs are close to $1 million over last year's. So when folks look at our budget and go, oh my goodness, how could that have happened? It's because we've had some move-ins, we've had some students that have had their needs increase, and by law, we have to service those students. And what I explained to the school committee too is that there is a process. I have a director of student services, and there's a team process. So a parent can come in and say, I think my student should be out of district because I want them to go to this school. We just don't do that with a parent. Sometimes lawyers are involved, which include costs because we have to pay for our counsel, their counsel as well. And if we come to no agreement on that, we actually have to go to the Board of Special Education Appeals, which is like a mini court where their decision is final. If we are successful and we place the student where we think they should be placed, it's okay. But if we're unsuccessful and the parent gets what their wish, we have to provide the cost for that. We also have to provide their attorney's fees, our attorney's fees, and any punitive damages that they feel the Board of Special Education Appeals feels that the parent are entitled to. So we try to avoid litigation at all costs, but that doesn't mean we haven't gone. But if we look at our budget, the biggest challenge for us this year has been special education because it's a moving target and it's been up. And I think you've been at committee meetings before where you've heard me talk about social emotional learning and social emotional issues. Our children are coming to our schools with more social emotional issues than they ever have had in the past. And that requires a different type of service.
Okay. Has the school committee approved your budget for fiscal 20?
So on Monday evening, after a reduction of $292,000 that I cut out of legal, out of substitutes, we had great news on the insurance front. We budgeted for a 5% increase. It was a 1.5% increase, so it saved us $175,000, so win-win. But we cut $292,000 off of the original proposal to bring us to a 15.1, I know people are going to be shocked, a 15.1 assessment to both towns to provide level services. That's without using any of our excess and deficiency accounts or things like that. So that's what we approved, that's what was certified on Monday evening.
So I got to ask you this, one of the two communities in the region right now is facing a significant deficit. There's conversation about a debt exclusion. There's a conversation about a Prop 2.5 override. How does this have any effect on the school district? Does it have any effect?
Well, it does, yes and no, because that community is part of our district. The challenge is that we are a district as well, and we have to be equitable to the other side, to the other town. So the two town administrators and I are actually, we have a meeting next Tuesday. I've met with the FinCom and we'll be going back to the FinCom in Whitman on the 26th with our school committee. And we want to work things out. The different things have been floated around. I think if anybody sits in this chair, if you listen to a chief, a fire chief, a police chief, another town manager, they've probably heard 16 different numbers being floated about. And I think Whitman's trying to solve their issue. I know I've seen different things on social media, back and forth. I try to avoid all of that. I encourage people to come to school committee meeting, ask me questions directly. I'm not going to answer questions on social media, although we do have a district website and I follow social media. But if people have, taxpayers, parents, community members, have questions about budget issues, and specifically, or any issue, they can give my office a call, they can shoot me a direct email, or my business manager a direct email, and we will answer those questions. I'm not trying to avoid, I want to answer as many questions as possible, but we will be here to support the towns in whatever they need. That being said, it has to be equitable between both towns. So the assessment affects both communities, and the assessment that was provided, again, is a level service assessment. That means no reduction or no addition to any staff or any program. One of the things that I was able to do in this budget was redistribute some of the dollars that we have to provide a math curriculum for our elementary students. Our math curriculum it was 7 years old, it's outdated, and we actually piloted a new curriculum this year. Without adding to the budget, we redistributed some of our teaching positions, our coordinator positions, to make sure that we had adequate funds to provide more curriculum and more instruction for our elementary students. I think people were shocked when I said we still don't have an elementary reading program, and our math program is outdated. That's something that, as a building high school principal, we've known for a while. We've contributed a lot of money towards our high school and our secondary folks to make sure that our kids are ready for post-high school career, work, or higher learning. I think we have to look back to see what our elementaries are doing. And if anybody in town can get a look at it, if they have grandkids or kids in the elementaries, you're seeing what our teachers are doing with not a lot of substance.
You had mentioned a number as far as the assessment, and 15.1, and I would think that's a combined number per se, and that would be, if you were to distribute it between the two towns, you'd have to divide that as far as a 60-40. How does it work as to who's going to be getting what for their assessment?
So the assessment goes to both towns at 15.1. Okay. But one of the things that I think folks in the district need to understand is the state, and I've heard a lot about the state, and Chapter 70 and in regionalization, the state was supposed to, and I don't disagree. I wasn't here when that happened, but I have watched our Chapter 70 money decrease over time, and that's been across the Commonwealth. But the town of Whitman and Hanson, or our regional school district, still gets close to 50% of our budget from the state. So if our budget is $53 million, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in Chapter 70 money picks up half of that. The town of Whitman and the town of Hanson then it will be split between, it's actually 6 to 40, you know, it's very close to a 60-40, but it's not actually a 60-40. Sure. So the town of Whitman their part of the school budget is actually 60% of 50%, and the town of Hanson is actually 60% or 40% of 50%. Whereas our other locals, if you look at East Bridgewater or Rockland or Abington, if the Commonwealth is providing 40% in Chapter 70 money, the town actually has to come up with 60%. So we're still in a pretty good spot as far as the state. I know, and I know people out there will say, the state promised this. Take that up with your legislators. I understand. We weren't here, and we're trying to do the best we can with the budget. But I will tell the folks in the community, one of the biggest challenges in our building this budget, is our underfunded and unfunded mandates.
I was waiting for you to say that.
I'm gonna harp on it. Next Friday, I've been invited, as all the superintendents have been invited, to Beacon Hill to talk about education with, and I'm going to I don't know which committee it is, but I got a letter from the executive director from the Mass Association of School Superintendents, and I said, come next Friday. It's an open forum for superintendents to talk about how education funding is affecting their districts. And my right across the bow is unfunded and underfunded mandates. In Whitman Hanson, not like Abington, not like East Bridgewater, not like Rockland, not like Pembroke, we have to bus our students to the high school. After 2 miles, we're busing our students, okay? That's the law. I cannot charge a high school student. When my son or daughter go to Pembroke High School, they're gonna bill me $200 if they want, or $220 if they want to take the bus. I can't do that in Whitman and Hanson. The good folks of Whitman and Hanson have to cover that cost. Now, the state says on paper, by law, it's 100% reimbursement of that. They're gonna give us all that money back. Right now, it's going about 65 to 70%, with their goal of being 80. We've never been 80. So we absorb that cost, and that cost this year is, we're short $301,000, okay? In special education, we're supposed to be funded to the tune of we're underfunded by $2,048,000, okay? Just in the big picture, our total, and I think Mr. Hayes read this at school committee because he wants to drive this point home, my actual cost for FY18, because FY19 we're still in the school year, but our actual cost of mandated materials and things was $8,131,147. I'm underfunded and unfunded by $5,067,542. Does that solve our budget crisis if I get the money that I'm supposed to get from the state? Yeah. I think so. You know, I think it helps. I think if my budget is up $3 million this year, and I'm supposed to get $5 million from the state, I think I'm actually giving some money back from the town. I don't anticipate that the state's ever going to fund everything that they're supposed to do, but there are costs that come along. One of the pieces in new legislation is providing training and dyslexia testing. Do I think that's a great idea? Absolutely. I think the governor is going to sign that in, that schools are going to be required to do dyslexia testing, which we don't absolutely provide right now. There's going to be a cost to that. I'm going to have to provide that. I don't know where I'm going to get the funds for that. So those are some of the things that come out. I think they're wonderful ideas. I think the fact that we transport students that become homeless, and we have homeless students in Whitman and Hanson, or they have lived here and they for some reason cannot find other living spaces, and we transport that student to Conley School because they're living somewhere in Abington or they're living somewhere. Do I think it's in the best interest of the student? Absolutely. Is that supposed to be funded from the state? Yes, it is. Is it? It is not. So those are the pieces that we hurt from as a district because of the mandates that are directed from us. And somebody said, why don't you just not do them? Well, I don't want to break the law, and I don't think it's in good conscience to do something because you're opposing it in that way. I'm going to talk to our legislators. Ms. Sullivan is our new representative, Mr. Brady, and Mr. Cutler. And I think we've had good relationships with them in the past, but these are some of the things that at that last school committee meeting that they were at, I said, these things are killing me, and I'm bleeding through because of underfunded and unfunded mandates. Not because of teacher raises, not because of retirement benefits, although those things add to the budget. It's the underfunded and unfunded mandates that are really starting to hurt us as school communities, not just Whitman and Hanson, but in the South Shore, in Metro West, and north of Boston. Some communities can sometimes afford those. Their tax rates are there, their assessments are different, it's a different community. But in a community that is a working class community that struggles for penny to penny on different things, telling and giving us a direction to do something and saying you're going to pay for it and then not doing it puts us in a real bad spot because we still have to provide that service.
When Whitman, the Board of Selectmen in Whitman met with their finance committee a few weeks ago, one of the conversations is to sit down with the school district and see if there could be some wage freezes or if there could be a freeze when it comes to hiring practices. Have there been any such conversations, and are you at liberty to share any details?
So I can't give you a lot of detail, but I will say that our school committee met with the Teachers Association in executive session. And out of that, I think our association is looking for some more information from the town of Whitman. Okay. I mean, that's as much as I can say. I think it was a very cordial meeting, but it was an executive session meeting. I'm glad the teachers actually agreed to that meeting. They didn't have to. I think everybody knows what's going on in the town of Whitman, but I also don't know if everybody's clear because there's a lot of messages on social media. There's a lot of messages in the paper. There's different meetings that people have different takeaways from. And what you hear and what I hear might have had the same thing, but our interpretation is different. So I think there's a lot of information going around that not everybody is fully concrete on. And what I'm looking for, and I'm hoping next Tuesday between Mr. McHugh and Mr. Lynham, myself, we can have an idea of where we are and what we can all do to help each other out. As a superintendent of schools, I'm committed to doing anything I need to do. If the town's agreed that they need to do a Prop 2.5 override, I will tell folks exactly what we need and why we need that. I've heard that there might be a department meeting some Saturday to explain our budgets. I'm willing to do that. I'm willing to do whatever we need to do because this is a community effort, and our schools are part of the community, our kids are part of the community, our teachers are part of the community. But I'm also not going to sugarcoat what I need to do for my kids. And when I say my kids, all the kids I'm responsible for, and that's the job that I signed up for. So I'm going to tell people directly what we need. I'm going to tell people we haven't even gone to what we want or what we should have, but what we need, and I'm going to continue to advocate for that.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation the word equity, and myself, I've had conversations with various superintendents, and I know that when we talk about, and this is an out-of-district type of thing, when we talk about gateway cities, when we talk about urban centers, and that there's been an ongoing effort for the past 2 years to look at an equity and education lawsuit, more or less a possible revamp of when they did ed reform in 1993. How does Whitman somehow, does the Whitman Hanson School District somehow become a player in that, in anything that may come of any lawsuit?
So what I know now, and this is part of next Friday's meeting, there's 3 different bills, and I'm going to misspeak on those, so I'm not going to speak about those. And I don't want to give out incorrect information.
Good.
But as I had a conversation yesterday with the executive director, I said, we're hurting. And he goes, yeah, they need to know it's not just an urban problem, that suburban schools and suburban towns are feeling the effects of different things in our economy. And the mandates that come through, it's not just an urban issue. It's not a Brockton issue. We have students of many different needs. And I will press on the social emotional needs of our students, that kids are coming to school from 2 working families or 2 working parents, sometimes 1, sometimes none. I know we're in the midst of still an opioid crisis. I have students who have lost siblings and parents and are being raised by others, and they're coming in with different types of issues that when I was a second grader years ago, or even in high school, or even 10 years ago when I became the principal, what their needs are. When I see students going to a hospital in fifth grade because they're anxious and they have to be hospitalized for treatment, that's something I didn't know about when I was growing up. And I'm sure many people don't realize that, but our students are anxious. Some of our students are medicated because of ADHD and ADD, and it's a real thing. And when on their medication, they're great, but if there's no parent or there's no support system or there's no counselor to help them out, they become issues and they're not learning. Part of our experience in the town is to make sure we provide the community with good citizens. And as the high school principal, I wanted to provide I would say this at freshman orientation. I really don't care how you graduate, if you go in the military, if you go to work, if you go to college. I just want you to be a productive citizen, and you're prepared to be a productive citizen, and you graduate happy. And that was the goal. Now as superintendent, pre-K to 12, from our 3-year-olds to our 22-year-olds, I would like them to be prepared to be a productive citizen in whatever career choice they make, because the careers of our kindergartners right now haven't been invented yet, and that I'd like them to be happy.
You had mentioned at an earlier point that you've actually culled down the budget book. It's from 80 pages down to 20. Is that basically so? If anybody wanted budget information, is that their lone source, or what if someone, again, citizen at large, wants to know more about the budget, get a better understanding? Is that the lone way, or are there other ways?
So I think the best way to go to the high school website, or the district website, and click on the business services and look at the budget. But if anybody has a question, call. I mean, this helps, these things. But if somebody says, hey, I don't understand why, and actually a taxpayer emailed me this morning about something I said last night at school committee, that we reduced No Atom is our science curriculum. And I said, yeah, when we cut that in half we cut that in half. And it's a very popular curriculum. It's a hands-on science-based curriculum, which costs $100,000 a year, every year for consumables. Well, we reduced that last year. But that was a question right off the top from the school committee last night. So if anybody isn't sure, and there is no such thing as a bad question or a stupid question, a question's a question. If you're not sure of it, give us a call, give Christine, myself. What I don't want folks to do if they have a question, pop on to Whitman Pride and ask that question so everybody can answer and give their 2 cents. And that's not a bad thing, but I don't know if it's an accurate thing. So if you have a question on something, one, attend a school committee meeting. Mr. Hayes says it every week or every meeting. Please, let's fill the gallery. We can have some fun talking, and a small group of folks can get things done. Second is just give us a call or shoot us an email. And Michelle Lindberg, my executive assistant, will absolutely take that phone call. She'll give me a note, little pink note, and I'll get back to you if you have a question on something. Document-wise, it's on the website, and if you're looking for different types of documents, we can absolutely provide them for you.
I want to thank you for coming here today and being a part of the conversation, which is very important. And I was going to ask about social media, but I think you touched upon it a couple of different times. So I don't have to ask you as to how it is used and if it's helpful or not. You already kind of explained it, but I'll ask you my final question. Anything we haven't mentioned in regards to the budget process, you at the helm of the school district, or anything in regards to what's going on financially with the schools that I haven't touched upon, I haven't asked you, but you feel is really essential to getting it across to the folks who are watching this right now? I think,
it's challenging when people say you're not transparent. And I don't really like that word. I like the word honesty. I like to be upfront. If you have a question, I'm going to answer it directly. I think that's my style. If folks of you know my assistant superintendent, that's his style. I think as building leaders, we were kind of like that. We're going to tell you. And right now, I don't like the flavor of the process of where we're at. It's difficult, and I know a town's struggling. We just want information. And when people go on social media and throw jabs at this, and I've seen different comments about, why do you have such an expensive high school? Why do you have such an expensive athletic field? Things cost, and that's part of a different part of the budget called the capital that we haven't touched upon in our big budget because it's a different process. There's capital items for Hanson, there's capital items for Whitman, and there's shared capital at the regional high school. But what I want to say is if people have questions, Mr. Hayes also, Bob Hayes, his cell phone's I think everywhere in town. If you have a question, call Bob or stop by the shop. If you have a question, drop by the high school. My office is on the second floor. And I said this at a school committee meeting. If somebody wants to meet me for coffee, I'll hit the Mary Lou's in the center of town or the Dunks by the Hanson train tracks. I'm willing to do that, and so is George, to explain that, because we're in it for the kids. We're not trying to, and somebody said, oh, you're hiding money in the back. There's so much money buried. If there's money buried, please help me find it, because I'd like to do that and provide it back to the communities if need be. I haven't been able to find it in the 9 years I've been here. That's one of the reasons we trimmed the budget book, because it looked like things were moving around. We wanted to keep it simple and make sure that folks knew what we had. And again, if folks have issues or questions, I know it's easy to get behind the keyboard, but instead of the Pride or the Connect or the whatever, email the superintendent's office, email Michelle, Christine, or myself, and you'll get a response back, and we can have that dialogue. And then you might educate me on something in the traditions of Whitman or Hanson, or I might be able to help you out in understanding why is special education up $1 million this year? Why is that? And I'll say, because it costs $250 a day for me to transport a kid from here to the specialty school in Boston that meets the needs of his specific learning style or his disability. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much for coming in. And I want to thank you for tuning into this program. We look to you for input, and we look to provide you with information for this to work both ways. Again, you're watching the program, so the other way is if you have a question, maybe there's a particular guest you'd like to see talking about these particular issues, info@WHCA.tv is your way. And until next time, you've been watching By the Numbers.